Hi, so my project is Factors in Team Success of the 2021 MLB season. As some intro, baseball is one of the most data-driven sports of the modern era, and this fact, along with my interest in baseball, made me want to do a project on such data. The question I set out to answer was, what are some of the most important league-wide factors in winning baseball games? This question's a little broad, so to get narrower, we asked what hitting statistics best correlate with winning, what pitching statistics best correlate with winning, and as some exploratory data analysis, we also wanted to see, do these factors stay consistent for the top tier teams, which are the division winners in this case. Right here is a summary of our findings in our analysis, but we will show that through our code. As for our data, all this data is taken from Baseball Reference. This is the website right here. Baseball Reference is great, and it's known among baseball stats fans. We ended up with taking the 2021 Major League Baseball season. So the 2020 MLB season was shortened to 60 games because of the COVID-19 pandemic compared to a full 162 game schedule. And the current 2022 MLB season is approximately only 20 games into the season. Since the 2021 season was played out in its entirety, including the playoffs, and all this data is available on Baseball Reference, I thought this would be a great season to take since it's the most recently completed season. We split our data. We took two data frames, one for the hitting statistics and one for the pitching statistics. These tables here describe the variables for the hitting statistics and some of the descriptions of the variables. Here is the same thing for the pitching data frames. And I will now show my code. All right. So here is us loading in the hitting data. As you can see, there's 32 rows by 29 columns. The first 30 rows of each details the 30 MLB teams, and the 31st row is a league average row, and the 32nd row would be a league total row, although it's not labeled. As you can see, there's several variables, several stats, several columns for this. These are all hitting statistics, and we did the same for our pitching. And again, it's the same 32 rows as the hitting data, but with pitching statistics. One issue for our hitting data was that there was no wins column. So we simply added it from the pitching data as the rows are equivalent, so this translated well. This is where we began our regression. Our first regression model wanted to predict wins from the hitting statistics. As a note, right here, we only took the first 30 rows because, as previously stated, these are the 30 MLB teams, and we did not want to include the average or the totals. So we use several of the hitting statistics chosen at my discretion, while some of the hitting statistics were left out, like number of batters used, batting age, because those would not be important in determining wins. In our initial run of this model, we actually find something interesting, that none of these variables here are statistically significant. This could tell us a number of things. The variation in these variables, input variables, could be too great for our sample size, but the most likely case is that the fit of this model is too complex, and simply a linear model does not fit this very well. Even so, I still wanted to work with this data, so we attempted to narrow down to some simpler stats that I thought would be more important on the general note. and we reran with wins as the target still, and we were able to see that doubles was significant. Still, this wasn't very good analysis, so again, we limited it, trying to make a simpler model, choosing some statistics, and we ended up choosing runs, doubles, triples, and grounded into double plays as our input variables. And we reran the model, and we were able to see that both runs and doubles were in fact significant. This adjusted R squared is 75%, which is fair but not great. It explains the 3/4 of the variance within wins. Since that was not a great model, I still wanted to try to do something with the hitting data. And instead of using wins as a target, I wanted to rerun it with runs as our target. Runs and wins are not necessarily equivalent. However, in order to win, you do need to score runs. So we will use runs as our target now. Here we chose a selection of variables. It is actually important to note that some were left out, like RBIs and home runs, because in order to incur those, you must always score a run. So they would not tell us anything about the ability to score runs. When we ran this model, we were able to see that strikeouts, OPS plus, and ground into double plays are significant. So we would rerun this model with the significant variables. And we were able to see that OPS plus and ground into double plays were in fact significant. This has an adjusted R squared of, again, 70.6%, which is not great, but is able to explain some of the variation in runs. So now onto the pitching data. Again, we got the first 30 rows, and we will use wins as a target with several statistics chosen at my discretion. This time, there's model runs, and there's several stats that are significant. So we reran this regression with these significant stats, and we were able to drop a few more. We see that balks and wild pitches and left on base does not fit our model, or is not significant in our model, and we will run a final model. Here, we also dropped saves because, like home runs and RBIs, in order to incur a save, you must win the game. So this would not tell us anything about winning the game. When we run this final model, we actually see that all of the remaining variables are statistically significant, and we will take those as our answers to correlating for wins. So, as mentioned, we did some exploratory analysis with division winners, and this code right here is us selecting the hitting rows and the pitching rows for each of the division winners, which is Houston, Tampa, Chicago, Atlanta, Milwaukee, and San Francisco. And here we binded the pitching into one data frame and the hitting into one data frame. Here is the pitching data frame, and here is the hitting data frame for these 6 teams. We wanted to create simple linear models here, not as complex as before, so we selected just a few input variables. Here, for the pitching, we selected ERA, total shutouts, or team shutouts, excuse me, in complete games. And we were able to see that ERA was significant. This was seen in the pitching before, so it shows that for the top teams, the factors that are important for them winning games does not really change compared to the league-wide model. So now we'll do the same with hitting, and we chose doubles, triples, and OPS plus, and we were able to see that doubles was statistically significant. Again, that was previously mentioned in the runs model from before. And this makes sense, as doubles is an extra base hit that allows a team to be in position to score runs or to drive in runs, while doubles are probably more frequent than triples and home runs. So this would be a great way to score runs and is indicative of that. Again, this model has an adjusted R-square of 96%, which is very good. So for our last bit of analysis, we ended up doing some sensitivity analysis. Sensitivity analysis basically says how sensitive a model is to each of its input variables. We ended up doing this 3 times for our hitting with wins as a target model, hitting with runs as a model hitting with runs as a target model, and our pitching model. So for wins, the wins hitting model, we're able to use the scale function in R to grab the regression coefficients, and here the coefficients are listed. This bit here is where we grab a absolute sum of these coefficients, because the calculation for sensitivity ratio is actually the coefficient itself divided by the sum. And as a note, sensitivity can be reported as either positive or negative based on what the coefficient is, but for ease of use, we would report everything as positive. So when we ran this, we see that for the hitting model with wins, it is 57.4% sensitivity to runs, 29% to doubles, 5.2% to triples, and 8.4% sensitive to grounding into double plays. So we redid this with our runs hitting model, and we can see the results here. Again, there's different percentage sensitivity for each of the 3 input variables, and we were able to rerun this with the pitching model. Our pitching model has quite a few more significant input variables, but we were still able to get the percentages for all of this. These numbers can be tough to look at listed like this, so we made pie charts for each of the models to easily visualize the actual percentages. And here, for the hitting sensitivity for wins, we can clearly see that the model is most sensitive to runs being scored at 57%. For the hitting sensitivity for runs, we can see that it's very sensitive to OPS plus at 75%. And for our pitching sensitivity, there is a greater spread in terms of our input variables, but hits is the most sensitive. So we will go back to our appendix to show some more of our calculations, but there is good reason for the input variables that we selected as to why they could be plausible. I detailed this more in my write-up, but there is very good reasons for each of the input variables to be a factor in incurring wins or runs. But here is just our equations for our final linear models. As we can see, the hitting model for wins, here's an intercept, and then we can see our runs, doubles, triples, grounded double plays, and we can see each of the same equations respective to the model for hitting model for runs and our pitching model. Here we detailed what we just talked about in our sensitivity. This is us grabbing our coefficients this is for the hitting model for runs. And here's our scaled coefficients for the hitting models. Here is our absolute value sum. And here's the calculations for the ratios. The remainder of this is just my code. And at the bottom, I put some references. I thought this was a good project. In the future, I would likely use more than just linear models and perhaps find models that better fit a data set like we had. But ultimately, I would say we were successful as we were able to answer our questions that we sought out, and we got definite answers to which factors are important in a team's ability to win a game, or in our exploratory score runs. Thank you.